expect if McCain wins, I'll fight him for 4 years or 8 years if he's in office that long. I expect to be fighting McCain, but I expect to have some success fighting McCain, whereas I don't expect to have any success fighting Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I support, it's one of the reasons I want to defeat Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be emergence of new third parties. I think Chuck Baldwin is a candidate to support. I think Ron Paul's a candidate to support. I think in terms of people's families, they've just got to make sure you're out of debt, that you're paying off your mortgages, that you're not living beyond your means or on a property that you could lose, with the expectation that employment is not certain, and increasing prices under inflationary settings is going to be the rule rather than the exception. So you've got to make sure that you can live owning what you need to live. I think there'll be people who, in different communities where they can, will think about, self-sufficient farming again and some ability to live in a more rural community where they can get by producing what they need in conjunction with neighbors. I think these ideas are going to return because I think people are not going to be feeling comfortable to be dependent on the agribusinesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as people can home educate their children and think about keeping them out of the public schools, these are all good things to give consideration to.
Okay. And regarding careers, probably never decide that you're at happily ever after state. It's going to be a competitive world, right? You're going to need to continue to advance your skills and constantly have to sell yourself to make yourself valuable.
There'll be a lot of job change kind of for the average employment.
Expect change. Expect that you're going to do something now for a while.
And you've got to prove your value perpetually when you're in the workforce.
It'd be better to pick a mate that, somebody to be married to that you can talk to, that you can work with over time, develop a relationship. People need to get back to staying in relationships and not abandoning them as a convenience because something is, not as glamorous or as easy as they think there may be some perfect somewhere else. Work with what you've got. Same with your kids. Work with them to get them to be as developed as you can do, with the expectation that things are not going to be perfect.
Well,
those are fundamental lessons that I think have our time tested going back centuries.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us because I don't know if you get asked that very often in your other discussions because you have so much cutting-edge information. In our last few minutes, I have one other question to ask you that's a little sensitive.
Sure.
And that's because we have a large Christian audience where we are in our discussion tonight. And what you've talked about is of benefit and utility to everyone in our society. But we're at a strange state now with evangelical Christianity where we have some people within Christianity that do not want to be concerned about political or social issues like we talk about tonight because they feel like it's a little beneath them spiritually. They want to stay focused on things of the kingdom of heaven, the Great Commission, internal church activities, things like that. There's yet other people who just want to wait it out. They're waiting for the Lord to come back. They know it's going to get bad. They don't expect to have any impact, so they're going to just sort of hold out and wait for the Lord to come back to get them. And then on the other spectrum, you've got people who've been very, very active that are evangelical Christians and trying to be a moral force in government, but they have spent a lot of time and energy sort of hitching their wagon up to what they perceive to be the powers that be, say in a certain political party. And no matter what this political party does and whether they regard them or not, with responding to the influence and their own loyalty, they're finding it hard not to be supportive with them or to say things that are counter, even if the candidates that they have are against the very views that they have. So we have people sort of in two extremes. These people that feel like they have capital and power invested in a particular party that has gone on and done other things, or we have people that just don't want to get engaged at all. As a person of faith yourself, how do you think that those who hold to a Christian faith and a biblical worldview should respond to the kind of information you've talked about and this whole issue with globalist elites who currently promote their own agenda to the detriment of Americans, their fellow citizens, and other citizens of the world?
Well, I think, there's lots of different ways people respond, and people of faith can respond different ways. I'm always reminded, there are many different rooms and many mansions in heaven. There's
right.
many different. Mm-hmm. It's not just one path or one way.
Right.
And people have some different choices that they can make that I would consider all to be moral choices. I think there are various parts of the Bible that also encourage people to get involved. We're encouraged to understand. I mean, I take from stories of, Abraham and go back to Sodom and Gomorrah and other stories where God basically is looking for one moral person in the whole town,
mm-hmm.
one person to be involved.
That could actually protect the entire city.
Right. I mean, God doesn't go in and say, I need to find, might start out by saying I need to find a large number, but by the time God's finished bargaining and the people are looking for the moral people, the number gets considerably reduced and God's willing still to settle.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't take everybody. It takes some people to be involved, and not everybody's going to have necessarily the time or the skill or the interest or the inclination to be as involved as others. And that's probably the way it's all sorted out, meant to be. But I think that people, to the extent they can educate themselves and get involved and pick a path and stick to it to try to make an impact, can realize some value in their own lives and feel they're accomplishing something that is a mission that is consistent with God's law and God's will. I mean, God's mandating us not only to be moral in our own lives, but to try to leave something here that makes an impact to others. And it's got to be done in a way of persuasion. I mean, I think people have free will, and if they choose to not agree, well, then we just debate them and fight with them and talk with them, and the end of nobody's convinced, we shake hands and go on.
So you mean don't force laws on people, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into morality. I'm into everybody's got to make their own. It's got to be clear to them, and some people fight it. I mean, I was in the green room waiting to go on the Glenn Beck show. Glenn Beck came and introduced himself to me. I was very surprised. A lot of the major hosts rarely do that, and he was totally unlike himself on air. He was very humble and very unassuming. And he said he had fought for years my arguments about the North American Union, and then finally just decided one day that I was right. He didn't have any other explanation for why the borders were being left open. And in his book, the inconvenient, whatever it was, inconvenient government, or his most recent book, I've got a copy of it here, he wrote a whole chapter that was based on my research.
Wow.
And,
cool.
He asked if I minded that, and I said, no, I was very happy he did it. It's called Inconvenient Book. And he wrote a whole chapter in here towards the end, and several people, including at Simon & Schuster, said to me they thought it was the best chapter in his book. Really brought it all together for him when he was talking about how this all comes together in a push for a North American Union. And, when Glenn Beck said all that, and I could tell he was being very truthful about it, it was a moment where I said, okay, here's a guy who had fought it, and I had never met, but was just by writing, he was reading it and thinking, and eventually he came around to see the point. And that to me was more important than if I'd gone up to him and argued with him and called him names. People, it's okay with me if people disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
I do expect to fight it out with them and argue that out, and I expect a lot of people will listen and make up their own minds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Corsi, what can people in the church today do to support you in your mission against these globalist forces that mean terrible, ungodly things for all of us in the world?
Well, I'm happy if people take the information in their own lives and have it impact them in the way people consider to be important. I'm pleased when they read it and think about it and study it and give it thought. And then a lot of people have been involved with the state legislatures. A lot of people have argued with congressmen and senators. I think today, when I started writing about this issue a few years ago, I don't think anybody was aware of it. today, or very few were aware of it. Today I'm gratified that more people are thinking about it and debating it. And it's not a foregone conclusion that free trade and, these regional governments and the European Union are going to be good for everybody. Mm-hmm. People are openly asking questions, and I expect that the economics are going to get tougher and people's lives are going to get harder. And when they do, I'll be expecting people to come back and look at things that I've written and said, well, here's an explanation that puts it together. So if they don't see it today like Glenn Beck, they might see it later, and that'll be fine too.
Well, in conclusion, could you explain to our listeners where they can get a hold of your information, follow your books and your other writings?
Sure. The Late Great USA, Coming Merger with Mexico and Canada, my latest book, it's available on Amazon.com. Just search my name, Jerome, with the J, J-E-R-O-M-E, Corsi, C-O-R-S-I. You'll find the Late Great USA. I'm a staff reporter with WorldNet Daily, and I'm writing there constantly. So worldnetdaily.com or WND.com.
And we'll put that link on our website.
Yep. Thank you. And the book is offered on WorldNet Daily. And we also have a DVD of the book. I gave a 3-hour lecture on the Late Great USA, and it was filmed. And that's a DVD on the Late Great USA available at worldnetdaily.com as well.
Cool. Great.
Well, what we're going to try to do on our end is not only publicize your work, but pray for you, and I ask my listeners to pray for you and your protection. You were probably public enemy number one with these globalists, or at least on their top 10 list, because you're getting real tangible information that is smoking gun data of what they're up to. And I understand your name must come up in a lot of these halls and circles behind closed doors. And we just pray that the Lord will protect you in your work, and that you'll continue fighting the good fight and keeping us informed. And we would sure love to have you back in the future, too, if you'd be willing to come back again.
I'll be happy to. I appreciate your prayers. I expect that if we just keep producing truth, people are going to read it, and God will take it from there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And can you give us just in the last minute a little hint of anything you're working on right now that we might be hearing some more about in the near future?
I'll have a new book on Obama that'll be out on August 12th. It's called The Abomination.
Okay, Abomination.
Wow.
And all that's been announced on it so far is that the book will be out, and the title will be published by Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
It's already been posted on Amazon.com, although the cover is not displayed. And the book's embargoed. I can't talk about it until it's published.
All right.
Okay.
But I can say that it's written, and it's going to be out there, and I'll be doing an audio tape of the book Monday and Tuesday next week.
Well, I got to know, did you already have a book on Clinton in the can just in case she won?
No, it's hard to write a book on Clinton. There's been so much already written about
Yeah,
Clinton.
I know.
It's hard to figure out what to write that was new.
Those paths have already been tread. Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's going to be a blockbuster. Anything else on the globalism front that you'll...
I'm not sure. I'll be doing something else. I'd like to do another book on oil.
Okay.
I'd like to get more out that oil is not dinosaur soup, that it's abiotic, that it's produced by the earth on a constant basis, that it's available. I'd like to write a book about the great oil lie. I haven't had a good title for it yet.
Okay.
That sounds like a good one.
We'll try to come up...
That's not a bad one.
We'll work on that, see if we can come up with something on that end.
That's good. The great oil lie is not all that bad.
Yeah.
But Abomination's a great title.
Mm-hmm.
The Late Great USA was a good title, and I liked Unfit for Command. I thought that was... I think Atomic Iran was a good title.
Well, these books are now part of the historical record of our country because they've influenced elections.
Yeah.
They've had a dramatic effect on the public psyche. And we just hope in our little small circle we can spread the great work you're doing to our listeners here. And I'm always ashamed to ask you to come back because you were in such demand with such large national audiences. But I want to thank you for being so loyal to us and being so flexible and willing to come back.
You're one of my favorite guests, actually.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you, gentlemen. I'll be happy to come back.
Well, please come back again soon. And so we'll say goodbye for now, but we'll look forward to having you back when we have some new news to report.
Thank you, and God bless.
And thank you again.